Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today's thrilling sci-fi adventure will have you gripping your seat as Khasia, an alien princess with striking red skin, crashes onto a war-torn planet. But here's the shocking part. At the climax of this gripping story, Khasia and her reluctant ally, the mysterious ex-security officer Radian, infiltrate a heavily guarded Imperial spire. There, they expose a conspiracy so dark, so twisted, it threatens to ignite an interplanetary war. The city's fate hangs by a thread, determined by a single explosive broadcast. Trust me, you won't believe how it ends. So, stay tuned until the very end to witness how this incredible duo challenges an empire's betrayal and sparks a rebellion that changes everything. And remember, if you enjoy gripping stories filled with action and suspense, subscribe to our channel now. It helps us create more captivating content just for you. Comment below your thoughts about the story or let us know where you're listening from. We love hearing from you. Now sit back, relax, and dive into It's Moving on Its Own. Is it alive? Alien Woman's Curious Discovery. Something was terribly wrong. Khasia knew it from the way the ship's hull screamed around her, from how sparks leapt like furious insects over the shattered control panels, and from the coppery taste of her own blood in her mouth. As she tumbled out of her seat, still strapped to the remains of the pilot's harness, she realized she was upside down. The once sleek royal transport was skidding across an alien cityscape, battered metal shrieking a final protest. Khasia's red skin glistened with sweat and a dark, oozing gash across her temple. She tried to correct the trajectory of the ship one last time, but the flight grip had snapped off. Her entire world thundered, jolted, then abruptly went still. She coughed, lungs burning, the overturned craft hissing with dying energy cells. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the city's ambient noise rushed back in. Gunfire, distant drone engines, and the crackle of collapsing structures. Khasia recognized a tang of scorched metal in the air. She was supposed to have used the ship's escape protocols, but they had failed. Her pilot was gone, flung by the initial impact, so she had nobody to rely on but herself now. Breathing came with difficulty, but she forced herself to focus. She had crashed on a strange world. No, not entirely strange, she reminded herself. Her empire once controlled these skies, or had at least tried to. Pressing a trembling hand against the ship's battered hull, she pried open the emergency exit. The door screeched as it gave way. Khasia half fell, half crawled over twisted metal, landing in a broken alley scattered with debris. A wave of searing pain snaked through her shoulder. A tear in her uniform revealed deep bruises and a jagged cut down her arm, but she clung to consciousness. The city was unrecognizable, burned-out buildings, lifeless vehicles heaped in corners, neon signs flashing half-heartedly through smoke. As she stumbled forward, Khasia tried to remember her mission. She had been traveling for a diplomatic summit, but somewhere above the atmosphere, an ambush turned her routine flight into a nightmare. Now everything felt inverted. She was the fugitive in a place teetering on the brink of ruin. "Is this real?" she muttered to the empty street. No answer came. She limped forward, each step an echo of agony. 5 minutes in, if you're still reading, drop a quick comment to let me know you're here. Type 1 if you like the intensity, 2 if you want me to dive deeper into the backstory. The city's broken skyline looked like a mouth of cracked teeth. Fires glowed from multiple sectors, projecting shadows that danced across rubble-strewn roads. In the distance, searchlights swept methodically, suggesting that someone, perhaps many someones, was still maintaining order here, albeit violently. Khasia's senses hummed with adrenaline, her sharp hearing detecting the whir of distant drones. She tore away the remains of her half-burned flight jacket, revealing a slender torso mapped with bruises. Although her blood pounded in her ears, she knew she had to be stealthy. A shriek of metal tore through the relative quiet. Something collapsed a few blocks away. Her eyes flicked toward the noise. Normally, she would have had a personal guard, squads of loyalists ensuring her path was safe. Now she was alone, and a prize for any faction that realized she was still alive. Khasia pressed herself against a jagged wall, searing pain in her shoulder intensifying. She forced herself to breathe through it. She knew little about this city, other than it was once under the dominion of the empire she belonged to. People might still recognize the royalty's insignia if they saw it. She had to hide who she was or risk immediate capture. But first, she needed shelter, somewhere to patch herself up and figure out why her ship had been shot down. A scuffing noise made her freeze. Then footsteps, cautious and deliberate, approached from around the corner. She braced, knife hand at the ready, though she hardly had the energy to fight. As the figure rounded into view, the glow of a half-lit sign revealed a tall human, clad in worn urban gear. He had angular features and a watchful gaze that didn't flinch when it met her crimson skin. He spoke quietly, tone casual despite the tension in the air. "You're bleeding. Badly." She studied him, lean, capable, eyes haunted by a past she couldn't read. "I'm not dead," she retorted, though the statement wavered with each shallow breath. "Not yet," he answered. He looked behind him, as if checking for pursuers, then continued softly. "Come on. If you slow me down, that's on you. But you won't survive the night out here alone." That was her first encounter with Radian, the ex-security officer who would change the course of her fate. By the way, let me know where you're reading from. Always curious to see how far this story travels. Radian didn't wait for a thank you. He simply extended a hand, helping her stand. Khasia's left leg almost gave out, but she steadied herself using a battered metal crate. Somewhere overhead, a drone's engine whined in a lazy patrol pattern. The human pressed a finger to his lips, then jerked his chin toward a side alley. They slid away from the main street, ducking behind piles of toppled signage and broken scaffolding. Her entire body ached, but Khasia focused on Radian's every move. He had the practiced stealth of someone who'd spent too many nights in hostile territory. She clenched her jaw and forced herself to keep pace. After 5 minutes of silent maneuvering through labyrinthine alleys, they reached a crumbling building that might once have been a warehouse. Radian eased open a side door, the ancient hinges groaning in protest. "Inside," he murmured. The interior smelled of stale water and dust. Dim emergency lights cast the space in weak flickering illumination. Machinery lay in heaps, disassembled or stripped for parts. The place felt forgotten, but Khasia recognized the defensive layering in Radian's posture. He checked corners, scanned vantage points, behaviors that betrayed a man well-versed in danger. Finally, he guided her to a secluded corner where a large tarp created an improvised shelter. Inside sat a cot, a few ration packs, and something that looked like a makeshift medical kit. He nodded for her to sit. She lowered herself carefully, ignoring the immediate burst of pain. "Hold still," he instructed, pulling out a small device that glowed faintly. He pressed it against her wounded shoulder. A cooling sensation followed, then a crackling hiss. She tensed, breath caught in her throat. The device began sealing the gash, and though it wasn't a complete fix, the bleeding slowed to a halt. Khasia examined him more closely. Short cropped dark hair, stubble that suggested days without a razor, and a keen intelligence in those eyes that never seemed to rest. "You said you're not a local," she ventured. "I'm not, but this city's become my home, one way or another." When he finished bandaging her arm, he turned to her with a smirk. "You want to tell me why the entire sector's hunting a red-skinned alien royal? If you're still with me, comment 1 if you like Radiant so far, or 2 if you're unsure about him." Khasia's red skin grew warmer as she weighed how much to divulge. She considered lying, but the memory of losing control in the cockpit, Her flight shot down without warning, made her realize she needed an ally, even if only temporarily. "They're after me," she said carefully, "because I was supposed to represent my family in a set of trade negotiations. But something went wrong. Negotiations turned into violence, or maybe it was planned sabotage from the start." Radian's expression hardened. "Negotiations, huh? Since when does an empire's royal clan treat with a place so ravaged?" "Since they want it subdued," she replied, sharper than intended. "Listen, I don't claim that my family's approach was flawless, but it's complicated. I was being sent to oversee a treaty that would fold this city back into our protection. Only someone decided my ship should never land." She flinched, recalling the chaos of that final descent. Radian tossed aside the spent medical tool, its energy cell blinking a meager red. "Your empire thinks it owns everything," he muttered. "Did you really think the people here would welcome you with open arms? They've been fighting for their independence for years." Khasia exhaled. Her shoulder throbbed despite the field dressing. "I'm aware of the tension, but I didn't expect an ambush in orbit. That was beyond local insurgents. Someone else pulled the trigger." He regarded her for a silent moment, as though evaluating her honesty. Finally, he shifted closer and lowered his voice. "You're not safe here. The city is controlled by multiple factions: loyalists who once served your family, mercenaries who want to grab power for themselves, and rebels who see any royal as a target. All of them will be hunting you once word spreads. You survived the crash. Then why save me?" She asked the question that had been gnawing at her. Radian shrugged with a practiced nonchalance. "Maybe I hate them all more than I hate you. Or maybe I just can't stand watching someone bleed out." Khasia clenched her fists, forcing herself to trust him a fraction more. "I've fought for survival before, but never alone." "Well," he said, standing, "get used to it. This city eats people. If we don't move by dawn, we'll be easy prey. By the way, if you're enjoying the tension, type 3. If you'd rather see more world building, type 4. That night, the warehouse felt like a refuge, though the howling wind and the distant rumble of collapsing structures suggested it was anything but safe. Khasia lay on the cot, eyes half closed, thinking about her family's last words before she departed. Duty had always been a chain around her neck. She was used to navigating the politics of empire, not running for her life in a burned-out metropolis. Across the tarped enclosure, Radian sat tinkering with a handheld device. Occasionally, he threw a glance her way, and she pretended not to notice. When she finally pushed herself upright, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles, she asked, "What's your plan, Radian? You keep talking like we have no time." "Because we don't," he replied, eyes not leaving the device. "The local patrol drones track unusual heat signatures at night. Your crash was a beacon. We need to move into the underground routes before sunrise, or we'll be cornered." Khasia pressed her palm against the bandage on her shoulder. The bleeding had stopped, but the ache persisted. "You mentioned multiple factions. If the Loyalists recognize me, they might try to drag me back to the capital, alive. The rebels will want me dead on principle." His lips twitched in a humorless smirk. "And the mercenaries will want to sell you to the highest bidder. Congratulations, your life has become a prize." Then she wanted to hate him for his bluntness, but she found a strange comfort in it. He had no illusions, and that meant she could trust him not to sugarcoat the truth. "All right," she said, flexing her fingers. "Let's move. This place is too exposed anyway." They packed what little supplies they had: a couple of ration bars, the drained medical kit, and a battered pulse dagger Radian produced from his jacket pocket. He pressed it into Khasia's hand. "You know how to handle one of these?" She ignited the blade with a practiced flick. The dagger hummed with pale light. "Well enough," she said, recalling 1,000 hours of mandatory combat training. Radian nodded. "Stay close and don't make a sound unless you want every scavenger in the district on us." Quick check-in. If you're intrigued by their alliance, comment 1. If you think Radiant's hiding more secrets, comment 2. And they ventured out through a jagged hole in the warehouse wall, the stars overhead obscured by a haze of pollution and drifting ash. The city was quieter at this hour, though sporadic gunfire or the whir of a passing drone still made Khasia's heart hammer. Radian led, and she realized just how easily he navigated the labyrinth of rubble-strewn streets. He moved with confidence in the gloom, pausing now and again to press a handheld scanner against a locked gate or sealed hatch. Eventually, he stopped at a rusted staircase descending into the bowels of the city. Old transit tunnels, he murmured. The main lines collapsed years ago, but there are still sub-routes if you know where to look. Khasia glanced behind them, half expecting a squad of mercenaries to appear. What's down there? Darkness, Radian said dryly. Maybe some smugglers, maybe a nest of drones, but it's better than up here. She understood. Up here, every second was borrowed time. Lead on. They slipped down the metal steps, boots echoing in the cavernous shaft. An acrid smell of damp concrete and mold enveloped them. Khasia could almost taste the stale air. Her heart thrummed, but she didn't complain. Anything was better than being pinned on a city street. At the bottom, they found a half-collapsed corridor. The overhead lights flickered, revealing ancient signage for what was once a commuter platform. Twisted tracks lined the floor, half buried in debris. Radian scanned the walls, found a control panel that looked half functional, and pried it open. Sparks lit the cramped space, and Khasia flinched. "What are you doing?" "Wiping any chance they can track us," he muttered. "Security cameras, motion sensors. Some of this old tech might still be running. Give me a second." While he worked, Khasia hovered behind him, dagger ready. She couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. The tunnels might have their own ghosts, rebels, or automated systems. It seemed safer than the surface, yet more unsettling by the second. Radian cursed softly and yanked a bundle of wires. The lights went out, pitching them into blackness. Khasia's breath caught. A moment later, he activated a small handheld lamp, the feeble glow painting his features with ghostly shadows. "We're off any official grid now," he said, voice low. "But so are they." Enjoying the atmosphere? Type 5 if you love the tension, 6 if you want to see more romance. They proceeded into the subway remains, the route twisting and turning until Khasia could no longer guess their exact direction. They scrambled over partially collapsed sections, ducked under fallen beams, and sidestepped pools of standing water that reeked of chemicals. More than once, Radian paused to listen, his posture taut, as though he expected an ambush, but nothing emerged from the darkness. After a full hour of navigating the subterranean maze, they found a shuttered gate. It appeared to be an old maintenance entrance. Radian dug in his pockets, producing a small device he pressed against the lock. A faint beep, and the gate's ancient mechanism clicked open. They entered what looked like a makeshift shelter or safe house. The space was cramped, just a single rectangular room lined with old crates and shelves full of salvage. A thin foam mat in the corner served as a bed. On one of the crates lay an outdated console that flickered to life when Radian tapped its screen. "Home sweet home?" Khasia asked, leaning against a cold metal wall. She was too exhausted to muster sarcasm. "Something like that," he replied. He set to work activating a basic perimeter alarm, rigging a tripwire or two at the door. "It's not glamorous, but it'll keep us hidden for the night." Khasia was grateful to have any roof above her head at this point. She carefully removed her damaged boots, wincing at the blisters forming beneath. Then she sank onto the foam mat. "I appreciate you not leaving me to die out there." Radian shrugged, his back turned. "Don't mistake it for charity. You're a potential bargaining chip if things go south." She stiffened, but the faint curl of a smile on his lips told her he might be half joking. Ever the cynic, aren't you? He fiddled with the console again, his expression darkening. In this city, cynicism is just common sense. With a heavy exhale, Cassia let her head rest on the wall. Her stomach growled, a reminder she hadn't eaten since before the crash. Radian noticed and tossed her a ration bar. She bit into it, surprised at how her body devoured the bland, gritty taste. Survival first, comfort second. The silence stretched. Finally, she murmured, "So, what's next?" Radian looked at her, eyes narrowed. "Next, we train you to move like a fugitive, not a princess. Because if you keep walking around like royalty, they'll spot you in seconds. Still with us? Comment where you're watching from. Does your city have subways or hidden tunnels like these?" Morning was just a faint promise in the world above when Khasia woke to Radian nudging her shoulder. Her bruises sang with pain, but she forced herself upright. He handed her a small tin cup filled with water. "Drink," he ordered. "We've got training to do." She sipped, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Training for what exactly?" "To blend in," Radian said, standing over her like a stern instructor. "Your posture, your accent, everything about you screams off-world elite. Down here, that'll get you killed?" Cassia shot him a pointed look. "I can hold my own in a fight." "Fighting's the last thing we need unless it's unavoidable," Radian retorted. "We want to slip through the cracks, not announce ourselves." He led her through a series of exercises in the cramped space, demonstrating how to keep her head low, how to move with a slight hunch, how to feign disinterest or fear without actually being incapacitated by it. At first, she bristled. She was used to command halls and formal posture, but Radiant's logic was sound. If she stood tall and proud, she'd stand out like a beacon. They practiced changing her speech patterns, too. He taught her local slang, or at least the guttural shortcuts people used in the Undercity. Cassia stumbled over the words, self-conscious of her usually eloquent voice. But Radiant insisted that if she continued talking like an imperial diplomat, even a child would suspect her. Once she'd gotten the basics, Radiant motioned her over to a stack of clothing he'd scavenged. They were rough, patched garments with no insignia. "Change into these," he said, turning away. She looked at the threadbare shirt and stained pants, a far cry from the sleek suits or elaborate attire she wore back home. Still, if anonymity was their goal, she had no choice. She slipped into the clothes. They itched, smelled faintly of dust and sweat, and were a bit large in the shoulders. Perfect. No one would mistake her for royalty in that outfit. Radian nodded in approval. "You're starting to look the part. Now we head out. And remember, keep your hood up. If they see that red skin of yours, every bounty hunter in the sector will have a target on you. Give me a 7 if you're rooting for Khasia, or an 8 if you think Radian has more secrets to reveal." They left the safe house through another concealed hatch, emerging into a portion of the Undercity that was mercifully dim. Flickering overhead lights gave everything a washed-out gloom. Distant alarms hummed, and the clank of heavy machinery suggested large-scale salvage operations. Cassia pulled her hood lower, mindful of the brightness of her red skin beneath. Radian led her down corridors lined with rusted doors. Occasionally, ragged figures slouched against the walls. Refugees or smugglers nursing injuries, high on contraband substances, or simply too exhausted to move. Once or twice, Khasia felt eyes on her, but no one approached. Some recognized Radian, perhaps, and decided not to test him. After weaving through a few more tunnels, they reached a market area. Makeshift stalls sold everything from questionable meal rations to black market hardware. Khasia tried to hide her shock at the bleakness. She'd known this city was suffering, but seeing the desperation up close was different than reading a briefing from the comfort of a palace. Radiant stopped at a grimy kiosk run by an elderly cyborg who replaced her right arm with a mechanical limb. He showed the vendor a battered ID chip. "Need new credentials," he said curtly. The cyborg sniffed. eyeing them both. Expensive and risky. You'll get paid, Radian replied. He placed a small data crystal on the counter, and the woman's eyes flickered with interest. She picked it up, slotted it into a worn device, then nodded. Come back in an hour. Maybe I'll have something for you, she rasped. Khasia followed Radian away from the stall. So, that's how it's done? You pay off black market forgers to stay invisible? He shrugged. This city is built on bribes. If we don't disappear in the system, the moment a loyalist or mercenary scans your face, you'll have 1,000 credit bounty on your head. She frowned, pulling the hood tighter. It's strange, all this effort just to blend in when I used to stand out. You still stand out, he muttered, gaze flickering to her uncovered wrist, the color of her skin so stark in the dim light. But if we're lucky, the city won't devour us, at least not before we figure out who ordered the hit on your ship. Let me know if you're reading this on your phone or computer. Always curious about how people enjoy their stories. The hour passed slowly. Khasia's stomach twisted with nerves. Radian led her around the market, feigning casual interest in battered goods. Old data cores, repurposed body armor, questionable medical stems. She tried not to flinch whenever a patrolling drone flew overhead. Finally, they returned to the kiosk. The cyborg vendor gave Radian a small nod and shoved 2 microchips across the counter. New IDs, fresh in the system, she said, though her synthetic eye whirred suspiciously. Won't hold up under deep imperial scrutiny, but might fool local scans. Good enough, Radian grunted, gathering them up. Khasia realized he'd had to trade more valuable intel crystals to pay for these forged identities. Whatever secrets those crystals contained, they must have cost him dearly. As they turned to leave, a group of armed men prowled into the market. Their leader wore a vest studded with old imperial medals, a loyalist commander by the look of it, or someone who'd scavenged the medals to play the part. He barked at the market stalls, demanding to see ID. Cassia's pulse spiked. She tugged at Radian's sleeve. We have to go. He nodded, jaw clenched. Act normal. Head behind that stack of crates, then slip out. They moved, forcing themselves not to run, but one of the Loyalists' men caught sight of them. Hey, you there, stop! Panic flashed across Cassia's face, but she obeyed Radian's silent instruction. Instead of bolting, she pretended to stumble. Radian barked, "Get up, worthless," in a harsh tone. He even gave her a light shove. She played along, cowering. The soldier approached, a sneer twisting his mouth. "What's under that hood?" Khasia shrank back, making her voice small. "Nothing. Scarred. Don't want people to stare." The loyalist guard loomed over her. Got something to hide? Before the tension could escalate, Radian stepped in, adopting the role of a gruff caretaker. She's just shy. Besides, we gotta get medicine, or she'll keel over. The guard hesitated, scanning Radian's worn clothes and Cassia's trembling posture. He must have deemed them unimportant. Move along, then. They exhaled in unison once the guard turned away. Radian slid his arm around Cassia's shoulder, half to comfort her and half to keep up the ruse, guiding her behind the crates and out of sight. If your heart pounded during this close call, type 1 in the comments. If you saw it coming, type 2. Safely hidden among the labyrinth of crates, they used a back exit from the market, slipping into an adjoining corridor that reeked of burnt wiring. Radian didn't release Khasia until they were well out of sight, ascending a shaky metal stairwell toward another maintenance tunnel. That was too close, she breathed, her nerves still on edge. He wiped perspiration from his brow. This city's crawling with opportunists. They'd love to catch someone like you and ransom you back to your family or to their enemies. Either way, we can't afford more slip-ups. She nodded, her thoughts swirling. Thank you, she added softly, for stepping in. Radian paused. Don't look so grateful. I meant what I said about you being a potential bargaining chip if everything else fails. But the hint of a smirk betrayed his attempt at maintaining a purely mercenary front. They emerged onto a side street lined with defunct neon signs, once vibrant but now only flickering with half-burnt letters. The gloom pressed in from every angle, but Radian navigated like he knew every corner. Cassia asked herself how a human like him ended up with such deep knowledge of this scarred metropolis. Shortly, they came to a battered door scrawled with graffiti in multiple alien languages. Radian knocked in a coded pattern. A small panel slid open, revealing a suspicious pair of eyes. Without a word, the door unlocked, and they stepped inside. The interior was surprisingly spacious. A hodgepodge of older technology cluttered metal shelves, while a single overhead light flickered. An older man with a heavily scarred face sat behind a makeshift workstation, calibrating a rifle. Radian nodded in greeting. "Terran," he said, "need a place to lay low, just for tonight." Terran barely glanced at Khasia. "You vouch for her?" Radian hesitated, then nodded. "She's with me." Khasia felt an odd pang of warmth at those words, though she hardly understood why. Terran grunted and pushed aside a pile of spare parts. "Fine, but keep the noise down. I got clients who don't appreciate surprises." Radian guided Cassia to a corner of the room where a threadbare couch and a couple of crates formed a makeshift seating area. Relief flooded her, another temporary haven. "Get comfortable," Radian said quietly, then inclined his head toward Terran. "I've got to see if he knows anything about your crash." "We're about halfway in. Comment, where are you reading from? And let's see if we have an interplanetary audience." While Radian conferred with Terran in hushed tones, Cassia took the chance to look around. Her gaze landed on a mounted display showing real-time scanner feeds of the city's surface. The lines and dots on the screen signaled various patrol routes, faction strongholds, and areas too irradiated to cross. She realized just how deeply these people operated in the underbelly of the city's conflict. Her attention drifted to the older man, Terran, whose scars told a story of battles no less intense than those she'd witnessed. Every so often, he'd glance at her with mild curiosity, but said nothing. Cassia wondered if he guessed she was more than a simple refugee. Eventually, Radian broke away from their conversation. He approached Khasia, arms folded. Terran heard chatter about a vessel shot down near the city's southwestern district. "Word is, there's a bounty out for survivors. The bounty is high, which means half the mercenaries in this city will be on the hunt." Her stomach clenched. "Do they know it was me specifically?" Radian shook his head. "No name yet, but your distinctive features, red skin, possible regal attire, those details are swirling around. We need to keep you hidden, or at least disguised, until we can find out who pulled the strings on your assassination attempt." Cassia rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of her predicament. "Why would someone want me dead? My family has enemies, sure, but it's not like they could profit from my demise, unless they're trying to trigger a war." Radian's eyes narrowed. "You think it could be orchestrated by someone within your own empire to justify a crackdown on this city?" She frowned, the possibility stinging more than she wanted to admit. "I wouldn't rule it out. Royal politics can be merciless." Before Radian could reply, Terran interrupted. "Got a small side room in the back if you two want to grab some shut-eye, but it's only for a few hours. I don't need trouble nesting in here." Radian nodded gratefully. "Thank you." Cassia followed him down a short hallway into a cramped space that contained a bunk bed, a flickering lamp, and little else. Exhaustion washed over her, and she wondered how much adrenaline was keeping her upright. "We'll rest here," Radian said, pulling a battered blanket off a chair. "But don't get too comfortable. By dawn, we need to be gone." Still hooked? Comment 5 if you want a deeper dive into Cassia's past, or 6 if you want more action scenes. Cassia awoke to the faint clink of metal. She cracked an eye open to see Radian crouched by the bunk, slipping small tools back into a pouch at his belt. Daylight, if one could call it that, seeped through a grime-streaked vent in the corner. The city's static hush pressed in. "How long did I sleep?" she asked, voice still heavy with fatigue. 3 hours, Radian replied. "We need to move." With a groan, she swung her legs over the edge of the bunk and pushed herself to her feet. Every muscle protested. She brushed a hand over her bandaged shoulder, silently thankful that the wound hadn't reopened in the night. They returned to Taryn's main room. The old man barely acknowledged them, occupied with adjusting the scope on a battered rifle. "If you're leaving, do it soon," he muttered. "Got a client inbound, and I don't need them spooked by strangers." Without fanfare, Radian led Khasia back out into the corridor. The city's hum was marginally calmer now, but that hardly comforted her. "Where to this time?" she asked, pulling up her hood instinctively. He hesitated, then said, "There's someone else we can talk to, a rebel contact named Zeta. She might know more about who's paying top credit for your capture, but it's risky." "Risky how?" "Zeta hates the Empire more than anyone. If she finds out you're royalty, she might not bother selling you. She might shoot you just to make a statement." Khasia swallowed. "Yet you trust her?" "I trust her to want intel more than she wants immediate vengeance," Radian clarified. "She's strategic. If I spin it right, she'll see the benefit in keeping you alive for a bigger political play." She nodded, though her gut twisted in apprehension. "Let's go then." They traversed another series of dingy passageways, eventually ascending to a higher level of the city. The architecture here was slightly more intact. Torn banners bearing imperial symbols hung in tatters, and entire neighborhoods stood eerily abandoned. Now and then they heard voices echoing from side alleys, but Radian carefully chose paths that avoided direct contact. Khasia kept thinking of how quickly her life had flipped, from secure nobility to hunted exile. If she hadn't met Radian, she might be in a prison cell, or worse. If you're feeling the tension ramp up, drop a quick comment, yes or no. We'd love your feedback. They approached what had once been a grand building, the facade half collapsed but still sporting a massive archway. The remains of gilded pillars framed a rubble-strewn courtyard, and the acrid smell of spent explosives lingered. Radian gestured for Khasia to stay behind as he advanced, hands raised in a gesture of non-aggression. A small group of armed figures emerged from behind the broken pillars. Their leader was a woman with cropped silver hair and mismatched eyes, one brown, one augmented with a faint electronic glow. She wore battered combat gear that had seen better days. Radian spoke first. "Zeta, it's me. Radian, I need information." Her augmented eye flicked over him, then landed on Khasia's silhouette. "You brought a friend, I see. That's a dangerous move in these times." Khasia stepped forward cautiously, keeping her hood up to shield her face. She felt Sita's gaze linger on the edges of her skin. Was it obvious she wasn't human? Probably, given the unnatural hue of her neck, where the hood didn't fully cover. "I need to know who's behind the bounty on the royal survivor," Radian said, voice firm. Zeta gave a short laugh. "And why should I tell you? The rebellion stands to benefit from that bounty, either by turning the royal in to fund our cause, or by making sure they never breathe again." Radian raised a hand. "If you turn them in, you might solve one problem, but spark a bigger war. If you kill them, you lose leverage." She tilted her head, eyeing him curiously. "A lot of talk, Radian. I remember you from the old days. Ex-security, wasn't it?" He nodded once. "What's your angle here?" Zeta pressed. Radian exhaled. "If the Empire is playing both sides, setting up a false flag to justify retaking the city, your rebellion will be crushed once the royals move in full force. We suspect that's exactly what they want, a staged crisis. All the more reason to figure out who gave the order to shoot down the princess's ship." Zeta stepped closer, scanning Khasia with her augmented eye. "Huh, she's taller than I expected, and that hood is cheap camouflage. Let me guess, a red-skinned alien from the Empire's inner circle? Khasia tensed. She could practically feel Zeta's suppressed hostility. Let's just say I have a vested interest in answers, Khasia replied. Pause here. Comment 1 if you think Saida will help them. Comment 2 if you think betrayal is on the horizon. For a moment, Zeta regarded them in silence, as if weighing pros and cons behind her guarded gaze. Finally, she barked an order to her men. They lowered their weapons and stepped back, forming a loose perimeter around the courtyard. All right, Zeta said. You want intel on the bounty? Let's talk. She turned on her heel, beckoning them to follow. Beyond the broken archway, the building opened into a wide hall where battered statues, once symbolizing loyalty to the Empire, had been defaced with rebel graffiti. The floor was cracked marble covered in a film of dust and footprints. They settled around a makeshift table, a slab of metal balanced on two cargo crates. Zeta tapped a portable holo projector, and it whirred to life, displaying a rotating image of the city's current known factions. Khasia recognized the insignias of the Empire's loyalists, the mercenary guilds, and the rebel crest Zeta's group used. Zeta tapped one region. This is where your ship was shot down. The hologram zoomed in on a sector near the southwestern outskirts. We've intercepted transmissions referencing specialized anti-ship weaponry, tech that only the Empire or large-scale merc groups could procure. Radian leaned in, which means it might not be the local rebels or small-time scum. We suspected that, Zeta shrugged. Word on the street says an individual known as Malix has been distributing advanced weaponry to certain rebel splinters and mercenaries, stirring chaos. But Malix is rumored to have direct ties to high-level Imperials. Khasia tried not to let her shock show. So it could be a double cross. Supply arms to local factions, provoke an incident, then swoop in with Imperial forces to rescue the city. That's the prevailing theory, Zeta said. If they confirm a royal was attacked, the Empire has the perfect excuse to retake this territory. Publicly, they'll say they're safeguarding their own. Privately, they'll crush all opposition. Khasia's chest tightened. Her family might be pulling off a carefully orchestrated move, sacrificing her for the bigger picture. But that felt too cruel. Her father might be ruthless, but would he stoop this low? And the bounty? Radian asked. Sita's lips curled. High, very high. Enough to make every mercenary in this city hunt day and night. The Empire claims they want the princess found alive, but in practice, no one will complain if she ends up dead. It's more convenient that way. Want to see how this confrontation ends? Comment yes if you do, no if you want more character backstory first. Khasia felt her pulse thunder in her ears. Betrayal stung worse than the injuries still throbbing in her body. She forced herself to focus. If Malix is the link, we need to expose him before his plan sets the entire city ablaze. Radian's jaw clenched. Where do we find him? Zeta tapped the hollow again, zooming in on a massive structure near the city center. Central Spire. It used to be the Empire's prime communications tower before everything fell apart. Malix has subverted it. He's operating from the shadows, but he's been seen near the spire's sub-level. Khasia caught a glimpse of an old insignia flickering on the hollow, a stylized crest of her ruling house. Once, that symbol was a beacon of unity. Now it was a mark of oppression to many. She swallowed thickly. If I confront him publicly, we can unmask this plot. But how do we keep from getting shot the moment we step foot in the tower? Zeta laughed, a bitter sound. You don't. That place is locked down. Even my people can't breach it without a fight. But if you want to risk your neck, I won't stop you. In fact, I'll help if it means the Empire's double cross is revealed. Her voice went deadly serious. But make no mistake, Princess. If you betray us, I'll kill you myself. Got it? Khasia lifted her chin, meeting Sita's glare. I understand. Radian cleared his throat. We'll need gear, a plan, and some way to broadcast what we find. Because even if we catch Malix in the act, we need the rest of the city to see it. I can arrange a short window of broadcast hijack, Zeta offered. We'll piggyback on the tower's network. You show the city the Empire's real scheme, and maybe people will rally rather than just cower. Khasia's heart hammered. This was bigger than she'd imagined. Exposing the Empire from within, that could either save or destroy countless lives, hers included. But she couldn't walk away. She'd seen enough to know how easily a lie could plunge a world into ruin. Deal, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. Sita smirked. Then we have an accord. I'll prep my people. You rest up, gather your nerve, because once you walk into that spire, there's no turning back. If you're as anxious as Khasia, type 1. If you're confident in their plan, type 2. Let's keep going. That night, Khasia found a corner of the rebels' hideout to catch her breath. The battered building was buzzing with activity, Sita's operatives coming and going, checking weapons, whispering among themselves about the rumored royal with red skin. Khasia kept her hood up to avoid igniting their doubts. Radian joined her, handing over a canteen of water. "You're handling this well," he murmured. She took a grateful sip. "Am I? My entire worldview's been flipped. For all I know, my own family sold me out." Radian exhaled, leaning against the cracked wall. "I don't think it's that simple. Empires are built on shifting alliances. Someone could be working behind the scenes, forging documents or codes in your father's name. Still, the result is the same," she said, voice bitter. "If we don't stop Malix, the city will burn under a false flag and the Empire will retake it with minimal resistance." He reached out, placing a hand on her arm, a gesture of reassurance she hadn't expected from the man who first claimed she was just a bargaining chip. She felt her tension ease slightly. "We'll do what we can," he said softly. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting second, the grim undercurrent of war and betrayal faded. She became acutely aware of the warmth of his fingers against her cloak and how his presence had become an anchor in the maelstrom of her new reality. But the moment was broken by Zeta's sharp call from across the hall. "We're rallying in 10. The adrenaline spiked anew. Khasia nodded at Radian, swallowing hard. Time to see this through. In the central chamber, Zeta laid out the plan in crisp, curt orders. 2 rebel teams would create diversions around the perimeter of the spire. Meanwhile, Radian and Khasia would slip into the sub-level. The moment they confronted Malix or found evidence of the Empire's infiltration, they'd transmit that data citywide. "Questions?" Zeta snapped. No one spoke. The rebels knew this was a long shot. Khasia saw it in their eyes. They'd lost too much to illusions, but a chance to strike at the heart of the conspiracy drove them to risk everything. "Move out," Zeta commanded, and a wave of silent determination washed over the group. Drop a comment. Are you feeling the growing bond between Khasia and Radian? Or are you here for the rebellion storyline? Let us know. They set off under cover of darkness. The city's flickering lights glowed like dying embers in the distance. Khasia and Radian stuck close to Zeta's small strike team, weaving through alleys and half-collapsed overpasses. Overhead, searchlights occasionally swept by, but Zeta's scouts signaled each time, allowing them to remain hidden. When they finally reached the spire's outer perimeter, it loomed like a metal giant, battered but unyielding. Once the epicenter of Imperial communications, it now bristled with improvised fortifications. Khasia could almost taste the tension in the air. Zeta split off with her rebels, planning to draw attention at the western entrance. Radian and Khasia circled around to a side corridor, sealed by a massive security door. They crouched behind a pile of debris while Radian placed a device on the door's control panel. Sparks jumped as the device began cracking the passcode. Hushed voices neared. Khasia peeked around the rubble. Two guards patrolled the corridor, wearing mismatched gear that suggested mercenaries. She motioned to Radian, who quickly canceled the hacking attempt to avoid the audible beep that would give them away. The guards advanced, scanning the shadows. Khasia's heart pounded as she pressed herself flat against the debris. She and Radian exchanged glances. They might have to fight. Suddenly, faint gunfire erupted from the other side of the spire. Zeta's diversion. The guards froze, heads snapping toward the commotion. One guard radioed for orders, then both sprinted away from the door, leaving it unmonitored. Radiant exhaled in relief. That's our cue. The hacking device resumed its work. In seconds, the security door slid open with a muted hiss. They slipped inside, entering a narrow corridor lit by red emergency lighting. The walls hummed with the hum of old machinery. Deeper they went, turning corners and bypassing more locked doors. Radian's scanner guided them around a cluster of heavily armed mercenaries. Khasia's stomach churned each time they heard footsteps. Any slip could be fatal. At last, they reached a room filled with servers and data terminals. Khasia recognized the older Imperial design. If Malix's operation ran through the spire, these terminals likely held the evidence of his collusion. She glanced at Radian, who nodded. "Let's find the truth," she whispered, stepping to the nearest console. "Send a yes if you can't wait for the big reveal, or no if you think they're walking into a trap." Khasia tapped the console's screen, only to find it locked behind layer upon layer of encryption. Radian produced a portable data slicer and plugged it in. Lines of code began scrolling across the screen. "Come on," he muttered. "Break, you stubborn piece of—" A beep signaled partial success. A window popped up, revealing files labeled with dates and code names. Khasia scanned them, her finger trembling. One file read, Operation Emberfang. Another, Expendable Asset. She opened the second file. What she found made her blood run cold. Logs describing an arranged incident to be staged near the city. A royal vessel deliberately targeted. The objective was to provoke retaliation, thereby justifying a full-scale imperial response. The file spelled out the intent clearly. Any survivors of the target vessel are to be captured if possible, neutralized if necessary, payment authorized by Malix on behalf of higher authorities. Radian hissed. "Higher authorities? It references your empire directly. Someone up there wanted to ensure your ship was shot down." Khasia's vision blurred with anger and betrayal. She read further, her breath catching at every incriminating detail. The plan was monstrous. Feed advanced arms to local factions, let them shoot down the princess's craft, and incite outrage. Once the Empire had a public excuse, they'd sweep in to protect the city, reclaiming it under a new wave of oppression. "It's all here," she whispered, voice trembling. "My family, someone close to them, approved this. They would kill me to orchestrate a perfect power grab." Radian placed a hand on her shoulder. "We need to broadcast this. Let the city see what's happening." Before they could act, the door behind them slid open with a hiss. A tall figure strode in, flanked by two mercenaries. He wore a sleek coat trimmed with imperial fabrics, and a malicious gleam danced in his eyes. "Malix, I presume," Radian said, voice tight. Malix's grin was predatory. "I see you've been snooping around. Radian, your meddling has gone too far. And you must be the oh-so-precious princess with the red skin, a perfect pawn." Khasia's rage flared. "You betrayed countless lives for this twisted plan." He shrugged. "All for the greater good, darling. Your death will spark the outrage we need. Or perhaps you'd prefer captivity? Either way, the Empire profits. If you're ready for the showdown, drop a comment. Yes. If you think they'll negotiate, type no." Khasia glared at Malix, her heart pounding. The mercenaries aimed rifles at them, but Radian and Khasia didn't move, yet. She clenched her fists. "You fool! You think the Empire will let you walk away once you've served your purpose?" Malix laughed, a hollow sound. Oh, Princess, that's where you're mistaken. I have leverage, copies of these files in multiple locations. Should the Empire decide to turn on me, I can reveal their dirty secrets to the galaxy. We're in business together, your family and I. You're in business with a shadow faction, Radian snapped. The real Empire might not even know about your scheme. Once word reaches them, they'll want no part of your little plot. But Malix's smirk never wavered. If that's what you'd like to believe, fine. Unfortunately, you won't be leaving this room. Guards, disarm them. The two mercenaries stepped forward, rifles trained on Khasia and Radian. Tension coiled in the air. Khasia's mind raced, searching for a way to leverage the environment. She saw the data slicer still plugged into the console, the screen showing partial progress on some subroutine. Hold on, she said, raising her hands slowly. She inched backward, letting the mercenaries close in, praying Radian would catch on. One mercenary reached for her belt, presumably to confiscate any hidden weapons. Khasia seized that moment. She ducked, driving an elbow into his gut. He gasped, doubling over. At the same time, Radian lunged for the second mercenary, delivering a quick strike that knocked the rifle aside. The weapon discharged, sparking against a console, but missing them. Malik snarled, "Shoot them, you idiots!" Khasia pivoted, grabbed the butt of the first mercenary's rifle, and yanked it free. She swung it up, catching him in the jaw with the stock. He crumpled. Radian slammed his opponent into the wall, disarming him with practiced precision. In the chaos, Malix darted behind a console, pulling out a sleek pistol. He leveled it at Khasia, but Radian tackled her to the floor just as a plasma bolt sizzled over their heads. Scrambling to her feet, Khasia fired a pulse from the stolen rifle, forcing Malix to duck. She shouted, "Radian, can you get the broadcast online?" He nodded, sliding back to the console with the data slicer. "Cover me!" Cheer them on with a quick comment. "Go Khasia," or "Go Radian." As the standoff intensifies, Khasia braced the rifle against her shoulder, stepping between Radian and Malix. Sparks danced across console panels where stray plasma bolts had hit. Malix fired again, forcing Khasia to retreat behind a stack of server modules. The hum of electronics filled her ears. "Cowering already?" Malix taunted. "I expected more from an imperial princess." She gritted her teeth. "You want to see what an imperial can do?" She popped out from behind cover, landing 2 shots in quick succession. Malix rolled aside, returning fire. The air sizzled with energy. Meanwhile, Radian hunched over the console, tapping furiously. "Almost got it," he muttered. The data slicer screen flashed green, indicating a successful override. A small projection lens rose, crackling to life. "Yes," he exclaimed. "We're linked to the city's main broadcast frequency. All channels." Khasia lunged across the gap, sliding behind another console near Malix's position. "Radian, start the broadcast now," she called. Malix's eyes widened. "Don't you dare!" He sprang up, pistol aimed at Radian. Without hesitation, Khasia came out of cover and squeezed the trigger on her rifle. The burst of energy clipped Malix's arm. He snarled, dropping his pistol. A second shot from Khasia's rifle took out the overhead lights. The chamber plunged into half-darkness, lit only by the flickering glow of the screens and the muzzle flashes. At the console, Radian pressed a final command. A citywide alert system blinked on every terminal. "This is Radian, broadcasting from the Central Spire sub-level." His voice echoed through the facility. "We have proof that Malix, working with certain Imperial elements, orchestrated the ambush on a royal transport to justify a new invasion. People of this city, see for yourselves." He executed a final keystroke, uploading the damning files onto public channels. In real time, data spilled across screens citywide. Khasia could almost imagine the hush as thousands of watchers realized the Empire's betrayal. Malik's staggered, clutching his wounded arm. A hateful glare etched his features. You? You've ruined everything, he spat. Your scheme was rotten from the start, Khasia retorted. Rifle raised, she advanced. Now the city knows. The Empire will have to answer for this. Radian locked eyes with her. We have to get out of here. His mercenaries won't let us walk away. Khasia nodded, but she couldn't help feeling a swell of triumph. Malik's was beaten, at least in the realm of public opinion. Give us a yes if you're relieved they exposed the plot, or no if you think a final twist is coming. Chaos exploded above them as multiple factions converged on the spire, drawn by the sudden broadcast. Rebels loyal to Zeta launched their assault, determined to keep the signal alive. Loyalists, realizing their darkest secret was exposed, tried to silence the truth. Mercenaries flocked for a chance to grab any advantage, and maybe even the princess. Khasia, breathing hard, gestured for Radiant to follow her. They hurried through the corridor, leaving a bleeding and enraged Malik's to his downfall. She'd have liked to see him hauled away to face justice, but survival came first. Shots rang out, echoing off metal walls. Up one floor, the emergency lights flickered over a scene of bedlam. Smoke grenades choked the air, silhouettes of combatants crossing in frantic bursts. Khasia and Radian ducked behind a toppled metal beam. She glimpsed Zeta in the distance, shouting orders to her rebels. Can we reach them? Khasia asked, voice muffled by smoke. Radian coughed. Yes, if we time it right. They sprinted, weaving through the warring factions. A rebel sniper fired overhead, forcing them to dive for cover. A loyalist trooper lunged at them, brandishing a shock baton, but Khasia knocked him aside with a swift kick. Radian helped her disarm him, and the trooper slumped unconscious. At last, they reached Zeta, who barked, You did it, didn't you? Khasia nodded, chest burning. We broadcast everything. The city knows about the Empire's setup. Zeta's lips twitched, part grim smile, part admiration. Good. Civilians are rallying. Some are already calling for an end to both the Empire's oppression and the chaos of endless mercenary raids. Radian glanced around. So, what next? Zeta jerked her head toward a side entrance. We exit while we can. My people have rigged a path out of the spire. If the Empire tries to land troops, they'll find this place in full rebellion. They followed Zeta's lead, pushing through corridors thick with dust and shattered electronics. Outside, dawn was breaking over a city no longer content to remain silent. People were gathering in the streets, demanding to know the truth, calling for accountability. The rising sun illuminated Khasia's red skin, drawing stares, but not the kind fueled by fear. Instead, some recognized her from rumors or the broadcast. Murmurs spread of a princess turned whistleblower. Khasia's heart pounded. She turned to Radian. It's moving on its own. Is it alive? She murmured, half in awe. The city felt as if it had awakened from a nightmare, ready to claim its destiny. Radian's hand found hers. Maybe it was always alive, just waiting for someone to light the spark.